two, three. One, two, three. Let's go.
Hi there, and welcome back to Culture in Action presented by Whistle. I am Alexa Dobler, your host, and today we have an amazing guest. Her name is Shannon Box. You've probably heard of her. She spent a good amount of time on the field as a professional athlete, very accomplished. She is a three-time gold medalist in the Olympics. She is a World Cup winner, and the things go on and on and on. Since she has retired from playing, though, she has taken up the task of looking at what it is like to transition out of playing. Her organization is called Ethos Mentality, and she's going to talk to us today all about how players go from being defined as this great elite athlete and then what comes next. It's a hard transition, so she's going to walk us through it and let us know what she's been up to lately. And without further ado, I will introduce you to Shannon. Shannon is a former pro and U.S. national team player. She has an amazing career where she has won 3 Olympic gold medals. She is a World Cup champion. Aside from that, she has been a U.S. soccer analyst. She has founded and coached for the Bridge City Soccer Academy. Her most recent venture is the co-founder of Ethos Mentality, which is an organization that helps elite athletes as they transition from playing into what's next in their career. We know that can be a really challenging time, and Shannon has set up an amazing organization to help them process those things and move to the next phase of their life in a really smooth transition. Well, welcome, Shannon. We are so excited to have you with us today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So, I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about you as a player. Have to do it. And since we're talking about sort of the culture that exists around playing and being an athlete, I would love to hear a little bit about your experiences as a player, regarding that, when you felt really supported and felt like you had really great environment or team culture, and maybe some things you saw as a player that were room to grow and places we could improve on for our players.
Yeah, I think it's a big question, but yeah, as I think in my time, I felt very supported most of the time. I think there are definitely different moments. I look at different levels that I played, and I look back at college, and I would say, I was very supported there. I felt like I was, both a student and both an athlete, and I know that can be hard for coaches and universities that are, hey, you got a full ride, you're an athlete. I know that, and so for me, though, I felt at Notre Dame that I could be both. I went and studied abroad my spring semester one year.
Awesome.
So I was able to do more outside of my sport because those were things that interested me. And
that's great.
I had to pull a little bit, but I had a coach that was really willing to let me do that. He also was somebody I felt that saw me as a whole person. I know I struggled with certain things, eating disorder, and he recognized it and was immediately like, you need to go get help. I'm going to help you do that.
Yeah.
So I felt very supported in that environment. As I became a professional, there were definitely, I played for a lot of different teams.
Yeah.
And there were good and bads to all of them. I thought that later in my career, you see the things that are going on in the NWSL, and I felt some of those things happening near the end of my career. And it was a bit scary. Like, you feel like you're not treated like a professional.
Right.
And you felt like, I remember how abusive one of the teams felt. Yeah. And I was more of a veteran player. And I remember at the end of the year, I had my own meeting, and I said, I know a lot of that is not directed at me, but I think the way that you're treating all of these players is borderline abusive.
Yeah.
And, I felt comfortable saying that to him. Now, I probably should have gone further than just to him. And that's something I regret, but it was also something that I did confront him. And what happened in the end was that I stopped playing. The next year it came back to kind of haunt me as that I didn't have that same ability to have those games and those things. And so that to me was a little bit like, if I can't do that, how is a younger player supposed to say something?
Yeah.
And so the culture becomes very toxic, and you saw that as the years progressed. After I'd retired, I continued to see that team really just go down this bad rabbit hole,
Right.
and so I would say those are kind of some of the scenarios. I would say one scenario that I remember really vividly was being part of a team that treated me like I wasn't a professional. They treated me like I was a young girl who couldn't have control of her own destiny. And it was like we were at the whim of the organization.
Right.
Scenarios like I would have a doctor's appointment planned because I had my schedule. This was the time of our practice. We would be at the end of practice and they were like, you know what? All of a sudden we're having a second practice. And I was like,
yeah,
we have a life outside of this field, and yet we couldn't.
Right.
And to me, that's like the complete opposite of being a professional.
Right.
So we are getting paid this much, which is very small, yet we're expected to be at your beck and call at all times. And I felt like that was not the way that I saw my life being as a professional soccer player.
Right. Well, and and that's so tricky because and we're going to be talking about what you're doing now, which is talking about that transition out. And one of the things that is really tricky is when you are an elite athlete at any level, but particularly, yes, when you become a professional athlete, the expectations on you are so high and so intense that it really is hard to find those places that you define yourself outside of it. Or finding the courage to, voice something when this is my everything. And what if something happens when I do that? Right. And all of that really boils down to the environment that, whether it's the organization or coach or even teammates, are creating on that pitch, So I think it's super important to talk about some of those places we can still grow, because I see a lot of progress, but definitely a lot of space to grow. And as we move into that, we're talking, you just mentioned that, that was the end of your career, and we talk about your company, Ethos Mentality. And that's really all you guys are talking about, is how you go from being an athlete to what's next. And we know that while we hope everyone has huge, long careers, there are all kinds of things. And, some of them have changed a lot. It used to be, if you wanted to start a family, that was kind of challenging. Now we see people becoming moms and going right back on the field and playing amazingly. So some things change, but, there's injuries, there's your, body takes wear and tear. You just don't know when that end of your career might come as an athlete. And it's a big transition. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how Ethos Mentality started and then what you all do there?
Yeah, that'd be great. So Ethos Mentality started about a year ago. It came about because of my own transition out of sports. I struggled a ton when I retired. I was 38 years old. I'd had my daughter. I was one of those that came back and played, but I wanted another child, and so I ended up, a year out of retirement. I had 2 young kids under the age of 3. I had no idea what I wanted to do next. And I found myself going down this path that was my mental health was starting to be affected, because I was so stressed about how am I going to help support my family. I'm, again, 38. I have a great background as far as I went through college, but I haven't had a job. I'm so far behind anybody else who is going for a position because I haven't had the education, I guess the experience that everybody else has had. And, when I finally sat back and let myself think about what do I want? Who am I outside of my sport? I started to actually move in the right direction and ended up realizing the things that I was very interested outside of playing soccer. And that led me to to starting to work in leadership development. It was something I was very interested in, something that I didn't know anything about before.
Yeah.
And once I saw that that was what I wanted to do, I started saying, well, where could I have a niche in this? And it made me think about all the athletes before me, all the athletes that have struggled with transitioning out of sports. And I was like, this is a part that I felt like if I had something that helped me while I was still playing, I wouldn't have been in this mess, and I wouldn't be, 3-4 years out still trying to figure it out. And so I decided to start Ethos Mentality. And so our Athletes Redefined program really focuses on supporting and empowering current and former athletes to redefine their purpose, build strength and confidence in the skills that they've acquired as an athlete, and then trust that those skills will transfer into their next career.
Right.
And so that's what we're doing. And, we talked about a little bit before of, we call it athletes, identity disclosure, where from being a young soccer player until I retired, that was my sole focus, was to become the best athlete possible. And I needed to do that to become the best athlete that I could be. But I think one thing that has happened is we've realized over time now, with all these athletes struggling with their mental health when they retire, is that there's something wrong with it. We need to make sure that these athletes have multiple identities. Maybe, their athlete identity is at the forefront, but you still got to have things that you're interested outside, because those are the most successful transitions. The athletes that have successfully transitioned out of their sport and into something else have had multiple identities while they were still competing. They had other interests that they were kind of tinkering with, and doing. And then when they transitioned, they just continued on with those things.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because it's the mental health when you leave your sport. But I think even doing that during your sport will help your mental health within that sport, I think, because it really is, right? It's kind of that if all of your eggs are in one basket, it becomes really hard if, things don't go your way. I know you and I had talked about, we had seen an interview with someone who was like, if I don't make the national team, I don't know what I'll do. And
I don't know what my whole life has been.
That's like, what am I doing? And that's just so heartbreaking, because you want to believe that because you're an elite athlete who's amazing, that you have this resiliency. And it's like, on the field, you might have the resiliency to pick yourself up off after a bad play. But, in terms of your inner self and your self-worth and your mental health, creating those different identities and understanding yourself as more whole than just that athlete, while still having the drive to become that athlete, it's a really interesting balancing act. But I do think that doing it even while you're an athlete benefits you even currently, not just when you transition out, right?
I would completely agree. Even there's studies out there that show that those that have prepared beforehand while they're still competing, they actually do better in their sport. And if I look back at my own career, oh my gosh, the stress that I had, the last 5 years of my career, maybe even longer, because I never knew when I was going to end. Me constantly thinking like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to be okay when I'm done? What am I going to do? Like, when I had those thoughts, I was constantly, yet I wasn't doing anything about it. Like the thoughts were there, but I wasn't doing anything about it. I was just kept stressing about it. And I think if I could have had more of a plan, and then knowing that, just maybe go ahead, okay, now I can put it aside because I know that that's what I'm going to go do. I feel like my game would have been even better, because I would have been so free to just be like, just enjoy this. And now I can solely focus on this, because in the end, I wasn't really solely focusing, because it was always in the back of my head that, what am I doing next? Who am I outside of that?
And knowing the process of how to figure that out is challenging. It is something, it's not just challenging because it's moving into a possibly new career, but just wearing a different hat in some capacity. Even if you stay in the sport, it's going to look different, right? And even if you're using all the same skills and they just transfer and look different, it still looks different. But I think when you're in it, it's really hard to know the steps to go through for yourself, right? Like it falls on you, and it's like, well, I don't have time to figure out all the things I need to figure out how to get there. I'm just worried about it. And so it really is this idea of having someone or people who have been through it and who are able to walk you through that process, because there's just so much you can't do everything. And those are not the things that they are teaching you at 20. They're not saying, hey, here's what's going to happen one day. But that's kind of where we want to head, is that we are preparing our athletes in that way. So I'd love to hear from you sort of some of the key elements for a successful transition out of sport. Like, what are some of those things that athletes can think about now that will help them?
I mean, I think the number one piece, because of the mental health side, is to make sure that you have those multiple identities. I think it's making sure, and it's not getting, when you retire, it's not that you're giving up your athletic identity. You're just you're redistributing what the things that you learn, redirecting, what you learn from sport into something that can be productive and help you develop beyond the game. I think that's so important. So I think the key element one is that you make sure that, even if your athlete identity is your number one, which it should be, to be an elite athlete, it has to be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But to make sure that you're also focusing on, and creating multiple identities, so that when you finish, that is a big thing Athletes Redefined program focuses on, is that athlete identity and how to kind of get past that. Sure. And to realize that that's not who you are, it's what you did. And you are way more than that. And just to take those skills. So the resilience, I am resilient. That's who you are. Right. You're not, I am soccer, right. So I think that's the number one thing, is to really give yourself more identity so that when you do transition, it is easier. Right. I think the other thing is just that preparation. It's, doing the things to kind of prepare. So once you have those different identities, start thinking about the things that you're interested in. I know that when I finished, my first thought was, I'm never going to find anything as passionate as I was playing my sport. Right. And then I found this, and I am like so passionate about it. There's so many ups and downs to being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And the times that I get so frustrated and want to give up, one, I bring back my resilience, which is what I learned playing sport. Two, I am so passionate about this. I want to help other athletes. And so I think that you can find it again. So I would say, as an organization, though, I think it's the responsibility of the organization to help have a holistic development. I think that has to be part of your program. Right. Your organization is to offer programs like Athletes Redefined to help these athletes be prepared.
Yeah. Well, and I think, that's one of the things that we're really working on right now at Whistle, is we're developing those education pieces that will provide for coaches and players and things like that. And one of the big ones is what's that post playing, like, what does that look like for you? And, one of the things I've been really stressing is the idea of, kind of just exposing the knowledge of the things that are at your fingertips as possibilities, right? If you don't see it, you won't dream to be it. And so I think a lot of times people think, okay, after I play, I'm going to be a coach, or I guess I just got to start all over and find a whole new career. And it's like, there are a lot of places you could work within. If you love the organization you played for, maybe you can work for them. And there's lots of different ways to be a part of that. But I think you're stressing the exact things, right? Is that you have these transferable traits that you've developed for so many years, that it's like any person hiring a person is going to want someone who has those traits, right? It's just hard to like you said, redefined is like the perfect word, because you're taking what you know and who you are, and you're just looking at it through a different lens. But that can be hard to do because you've only had to see it on the soccer field for so long.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of things. You just you don't even, I think that was for me when I went to do, pretty much an appearance. Yeah. I was still kind of, again, as the athlete, I'm coming into this environment. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, I know more, but here I am going into this situation. And as I was there, I started to see, okay, there's these leadership development coaches who are working with these women in this corporation. And I was like, well, what do you do? What is that? There's so many positions that we just don't really know about. And so it's giving an environment to these athletes to be able to explore.
Yeah.
And, one thing I think too, that I always felt was missing in our leagues, I've been part of all 3 leagues,
right?
was here we have this platform that's sitting right in front of us.
Yeah.
It's a business,
right?
Like how can we, during our time of being a player, also do some work in the office or something that's interesting? Now there's media, and I think that's what I love about being part of Angel City.
Yeah.
I feel like they are doing that. They're really working to make sure that they're putting their athletes in a position to be successful on the field and off the field.
Right.
Finding out what they're interested in. Maybe it's nonprofits. Okay, let's get you out over to those things and doing those things. Now you're gaining experience that they don't even realize they're gaining their experience. Like,
exactly.
That then they can use in an interview or say, hey, well, while I was playing, I did this, I did X.
Yeah.
And that gave me the experience. And then now businesses are like, you do have experience. Now I can, I can hire you. So I felt like that was missing a lot as well, is creating opportunities for your athletes to be focused in your sport, but there's time, you go to practice for 2 hours. What are you doing the rest of the day?
You're right. And I think that piece of like getting involved in your organization or your community in certain ways, it also really builds the confidence of leadership, right? So if you're going to go in and help, a youth program and just help and be a volunteer, and you start to like develop this other sense of self that you're really confident off the field too. It's like that confidence you have on the field doesn't always come right with you to everything else you do because you still feel new to something. So I think that piece of getting involved while playing in some different, whether it's in your organization, right? Like I know there's people who love photography or social media or, there's so many ways you can develop different skills that start to then boost your confidence for what will be defining yourself again later.
Yeah. And I think one thing too, especially when we work with current athletes, a big focus for me would be to make sure that like, hey, like this is in your control. Like, I think we've gotten so much into that way, especially as a professional, like, okay, everybody's going to give us things. They're going to tell us when to do stuff. Like we're very like structured day. They tell us every hour what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
It's taking control of your own future. Right. So maybe they're not offering all this stuff. Why can't I go into the front office and say, hey, like I'm interested in this. Can I shadow somebody?
Sure.
Can I do this? Do you have something in the off season I can do? It's taking kind of control of your own life too. And asking.
Yeah.
The worst they can do is say no, and then you can go another route. But
right
now I think we're always waiting. I know I was like, hey, I'm waiting for someone to tell me like, okay, here you go, try this. Like where it's like, no, you got to have your own, control. And if you want this, go ask for it.
And I think I'm seeing younger people who are feeling a little more confident in that, but then we also forget that they are still young people, right? That they are very young. And so while they might be confident in their own voice, it really is like, I look at my role and education is my background. So I'm always saying like, hey, you got to try, right? If you put it out there, like you said, they might say no, but you'll survive. Just like you lose a big game and you survive, like you'll be okay. But I think sometimes too, it's even just giving that permission to athletes that it's like, you can pursue more, you can do it, like it's almost like as soon as you say, go ahead, like go ask to shadow or go try to learn new things. I think then it's like, oh, I'm empowered to do this for myself.
But there's been a fear, right? Because like, if you think about it, coaches and organizations, they've hired you to be the athlete. And so I think there's fear. And then there's fear on the athlete side is, well, I can't show them that I'm interested in something more. Maybe they'll find somebody who's just focused on one thing. And so I completely get it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the organization needs to change a little, right? Yeah. Like there has to be a mindset shift in thinking that way, that they're not bringing less of themselves to their sport, by opening themselves up to thinking about what else. Yeah. Because the thing is no matter what, an athlete's career has a finite time to it.
Right.
No matter if you end on your own or end because of an injury or getting
Right.
cut or what, it doesn't matter. I mean, I ended exactly how I wanted to, and I still struggled,
Sure.
so.
Yeah. Well, okay. So shifting a little, what you all do at Ethos, I'd love if you could tell us, like, so if people are listening and they are involved with athletes or they work at organizations, how can they get in touch with you, or what can they reach out to you as support, or what do you guys do for organizations that they might be able to find you?
Yeah. So, I mean, support at ethosmentality.com is a great site. You can go to our website, which is ethosmentality.com. And there at the very bottom is a area that you can get a hold of us. So that's a great way to do that. I say right now we do independent workshops for all different types of athletes, not just soccer players, but we also have packages to go out to teams and to leagues and to players associations. So where we can either hold an independent workshop again for a number of athletes, or we can kind of come in and do a 1-day with the team that gives them a really good starting spot to start thinking about their next chapter. And so, like I said, we really do work with current athletes, because I think when we go to post, obviously there's so many former athletes that need help now. So we're still in that realm, but if we can get to a current athlete and help them so that transition is faster, that's the route that we would, that's the route we really want to take. So I would say those are the two options for sure. And, we just held one workshop already, a couple athletes, and it went really great. And just excited to continue to work with more. Nice.
Okay. So as we wrap it up, obviously you've had quite an impact on women's soccer for sure. And, we are seeing such a boom right now, I feel like, in the women's soccer world, both on the field, but also like culturally and all the things. But always room to grow. So I would love to hear kind of what are your hopes for the future of women's soccer, as we're going into this, like getting lots of attention and, it's a big deal and it's good business right now and all of that. What are you hoping to see?
I mean, I think just the continued investment in the women's game, I think, is just so huge. And, you're looking at these athletes, and again, you're starting to see it in this new generation that they are more than just their sport. You're seeing them like Megan Rapinoe, who is voicing and using her voice and her platform for more important things, And so I think for me, it's just to continue to invest in women, continue to see equity in that realm as well. And, I would say the other thing too, though, is just to continue to see the growth of the actual game. You're seeing this last World Cup, and so many countries have just improved, and to see the African nations all make it to the next round, I think was just so big, so I would say that, but that starts with the youth game.
Yeah.
I think we need to make sure that we're on the right track with our youth, women, girls, especially. I have a daughter who is in the club world, and it's crazy. And, I wish there was another route, but there isn't right now. So she's going through it, and I feel terrible that I'm like, it is so different than when I did, and the level is so much more intense, which on the one hand is great, because it's just going to bring these athletes up, and the technical ability and tactical is going to be so much better. But it makes me nervous, when you are putting so much pressure on a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
So I wish there was a better way to do the youth game.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be more equity. I mean, equal, I don't even know how to say it exactly, but just there needs to be more equality in the youth game as far as the girls and the boys. I still feel in every club, the boys get more than the girls.
Sure.
And I would like to see that more even.
Absolutely. Well, and I mean, and it, and that's, I just saw on the, it was like on my news feed the other day about, venue dates for, the Wave in San Diego and stuff. And it's like, Okay, so when does the default not be
Yeah.
men versus women or boys versus girls? When
Right.
we need to start moving that needle into where we're just saying all of the soccer players or all of the athletes,
Yeah.
right? As a whole. So I agree.
Getting equal treatment, that would be great to see.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is then when we're talking about athletes, once they get to pro level, obviously they have a lot. I mean, they're amazing and they've committed so much to this, but it is ingrained in them that, right, if they're always second or always, I mean, that does become a part of their makeup. And we really want to raise young women who, believe in themselves fully. And part of that comes from the things that, those subconscious messages that they get at that youth level, right? The coaches and
agree.
How they're treated, all of that really matters.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I will make sure to tag all of like Ethos Mentality and share your website and all of that, because I think it is really vital. And in particular, coaches and teams and leagues, that we all as leadership start to look at those whole people that we serve. So thank you for all that you do and being here today.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for spreading the word as well.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm very excited about the league and everything. I think it's such a great space. And obviously then it just creates even more, right? To get into the NWSL, and
that's the goal,
another
right?
pathway, which is so needed. There's not always one way to get, to the top. And so I think that you guys are creating yet another pathway to get there. So it's awesome.
Well, thank you. That's great to hear. Well, thanks again. And I'm sure we'll be in touch, and we'll push out anything you guys have coming up, and keep your eye out for Ethos Mentality.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. What a great conversation with Shannon. Very enlightening as to all the things we can be doing for our current athletes to help prepare them for the future. If you or someone you know is working to make change in the women's game, be sure to tag us on social media so we can see your culture in action. And until next time, be bold, go out and make a difference. Bye.